G'day everyone. Just here going to record a little video on how to tune your Simrad. We've got a NSS Evo2 7-inch display here. Quite often get asked questions about how I tune my sounder for the deeper water fishing that we do. So I just want to touch on a few of the more advanced settings for these type of Simrad Evo2 units. They're a multi-function display, so they'll do not only your sounder, they'll do your chart, so your navigation, radar, interface with your engine, stream video, autopilot. They're really the one-stop shop. But once it comes to sounding out in that deeper water, so we're talking in excess of probably 130 metres or out past that 60 to 70 fathom mark, these units, whilst they're awesome in the shallow water, they do need a little bit of tweaking once you get to that deeper water. And generally speaking, it's just taking the auto control away from the device. My setup here, just quickly, I'm not using any of the chirp features. We don't have a BSM unit, so a broadband sounder module. The more common ones are the BSMs 2 or 3. I'm running a standard 50-200 high-low frequency Airmar B164 through-hole transducer. I'm finding that quite good. It does what we need it to do out around that continental shelf area very well. And as I say, with a little bit of extra tuning, I'm sure you can get the same sort of performance from it as we get from ours. I'll just run you through a few of the settings that we use. Again, by no means any expert on this. This is just what's worked for me. Different days you're going to get different conditions, and I quite often find that there isn't really one setting that works perfectly each day you go out. You might have more current or more sea, and we're only in an 18-foot trailer boat here, so our transducer is quite prone to bottom breaks from time to time, particularly in the rougher water, where it's getting air over the face of the transducer just trolling along. And with that, you do get a little bit more noise and a little bit more clutter, but it's something that you live with, and it certainly doesn't impact on the unit's ability to mark fish. So what we're going to do is just go through and show a couple of little features. I'm running in simulation mode here, so unfortunately you're not going to get real time. It's the only way I could really do it without making people feel seasick watching the video. So it's only going to be showing shallow water, but the same settings apply regardless. Alright, so here we go. If you need to get to your sounder screen from the home screen, it's just a matter of touching echo. Now, the first thing that I change, and again this is personal preference, but the palette colour. I like using the blue background, which is palette 2 on Simrad, and you change that by going to menu, down to view, and palette, which is the third one down, and I use palette 2. Again, I don't think it changes the way the unit reads, I just find it easier to see when I'm walking around the boat. Now we'll just touch on the difference between high and low frequency. That can be confused quite often. 200 Hertz, which is the high frequency, it's terrific, particularly through my B164 when I'm travelling at speed. So on the plane doing cruise speed 22, 23 knots, running out to the shelf. High frequency is your narrow beam. It's got a great level of detail. It works amazingly well in the shallow water, and in this particular transducer on my boat, it works great for marking bait and the bottom all the way out to the shelf. Once I get out to the shelf and I get my gear in the water, so whether I'm trolling lures, skip baits or live baits, I'll generally flick over to low frequency. Low frequency is your wider cone angle. It will be more prone to picking up interference and clutter, again particularly in a smaller boat, just due to the wider cone angle, I believe. So it's seeing a lot more noise, it's seeing a lot more interference from under the boat, but it will give you the bigger arches, and let's face it, that's what we're all looking for. Now to change to low frequency from this screen, you'll go into your menu and frequency, and there's a list of different frequencies that you can choose from. Again, not being a chirp transducer, you just click 50 Hertz here, and that'll give me low frequency, and the unit will now change down into 50 Hertz and low frequency, which you can see on the left hand of the screen here. Once I'm in 50 Hertz, there's a few other things that I like to do, particularly for the deep water, which is what we're focusing on here. The first one is I always go in and take full control over the range setting. A range means what depth, or what depth the transducer and the sounder is actually looking to. Once I'm out on the continental shelf, it's always nice to see the bottom, and this transducer will read out to 350 fathoms on low frequency without too much of a problem. But honestly, when I'm out there trolling, I'm looking for pelagic fish like marlin and tuna, not interested what's down that deep, and my main area of focus is the top sort of 60 to 80 fathoms. So I'll go in and adjust my range. Now it'll change what we're seeing here on the screen because we're only reading 4.5 meters, but if we go in, range is the very top setting. You'll see at the moment, auto button, the auto box is selected. I want to untick that, and now we've got infinite control over the range of this unit. Let's just say, for instance, we're reading in meters here, but if I wanted to read the top 100 meters, we'd select that. Now obviously, because we're only reading 4.5 meters in the simulation mode, it's compressing and condensing the bottom right to the very top there. So for the exercise, we'll just keep it, let's say 10 meters. So now, if you go outside of 10 meters, you're going to lose the bottom off the picture. The sounder's still going to be able to read the bottom, and it'll continue reading the depth. But if for instance we wanted to read the top 3 meters here, so now the bottom is below the screen, but we're only seeing what's in that top or the upper part of the water column. You can see straight away by doing that, even these faint reads that we're getting here in simulation mode, those little arches all of a sudden become much bigger, and that's something that's important to remember. If you are fixated on seeing the bottom when you're out on the shelf, then you will not get big reads as far as big echoes or big arches from fish like tuna and marlin in particular. So if you want your bigger arches, guys, low frequency, and bring your range setting up to, you know, 100 meters, or if you're in fathoms, 60, 70 fathoms, something like that will give you some decent reads. So range is a big one. The units do start to overthink things if you leave that in auto. It's constantly looking for the bottom, and again you're going to miss a lot of that detail in the upper water column. Now just going through into gain settings. So gain is the amount of power that you're putting through the water, how much power you're sending down through that transducer. Again, auto works great in a lot of scenarios, but once you get out a bit wider on rougher days, you probably want to start having a bit of a play with that. Again, you can knock that out of auto. Now what a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that because you can be in auto and still increase the gain, you can see there we've got a +2, so that's auto plus we've added another two increments of power to the unit. So the auto is going to continue trying to work for you, which in some ways is good and in other ways can be a problem, particularly out in that deeper water. So if you're starting to find that you want to get infinite control over the machine, just unselect auto. It'll go back to a default setting. It'll leave a grey line there which will show where it was last, and just by increasing, now you can really take full control over how much clutter or noise or how much power you want to transmit through the water. I don't mind having a bit of clutter. I think on the Simrads that works quite well. If you take too much of it out because you're getting a little bit fixated on the amount of noise that you're seeing on the screen, you could start missing reads. So yeah, a little bit of gain, and just like that, you're not losing your reads, so they're still marking up nice. You get a little bit of clutter, and for me that's pretty much a happy place. Colour's another one. You can crank that right up, and you can see you start losing your detail by doing that. So just coming back down until you're getting nice soft edges and just enough colour there to, oops, gone a bit far, just somewhere like that's looking pretty good. Again, got to do this out on the water, guys. Doing in simulation mode is not really giving you a full indication. Don't pay attention to the numbers that we're getting here or the settings in relation to what I'm showing. This is purely, it really is more what you see on the day, what you're looking at and what you're interpreting on the screen. So the other part that I like to include is my A-scope. So an A-scope, you can see it here on the bottom now, does two things. Shows you how much power you're putting through the transducer. So again, if you go back into the gain setting and you crank that up, you'll see that the A-scope will start to really get a lot darker through here, and it's just showing basically what the A-scope does in essence is it shows you what's directly under the boat. So the minute the transducer marks something directly underneath your boat, it's going to read up on here. So anything off to the left of the A-scope is in the past, it's historical information. Depending on the depth and quite often out on the continental shelf, the deeper you go, the longer it takes for your pings from your transducer to return back and be interpreted. You could have 10-15 minutes worth of sounder history on your screen. So over the left here could be a fish or bait you marked more than 10 or 15 minutes ago, so just be careful to keep that in mind. Something else that can affect, two other things really that can affect the time it takes for reads to go past your screen. A couple of them here. Again, back into advanced. Scroll speed. I like to run mine on about +2 out in the deeper water. I find that works pretty well almost everywhere. Again, the slower or the deeper you go, rather, regardless, you could have that scroll speed turned all the way up. But as soon as you get into that deep water, the returns from the transducer just can't get back in the same speed that ×8 would be able to interpret them in. So quite often it'll slow it right down. So ×2 works well for me out in the deep water, and it will slow down as you get deeper. Ping speed's another pretty important one. It's something that's not really all that well understood or used, but again in a Simrad I find it's important to have a pretty good grip on it. In shallow water, so again sort of 70 metres and less, you can pretty much leave your ping speed on max. It's going to give you the fastest possible screen refresh rate, great detail, but as soon as you get out of that deeper water, a particular example or something you might see that could be a reason for reducing a ping speed might be vertical interference. So you may see lines running vertically top to bottom across your screen, all over the screen. That's typically a ping speed problem. It can also, and be careful here, it can also be interference or noise from another boat's transducer. So if you're fishing next to another boat, anywhere really out to 50 to 80 metres I find, depending on what transducer, what power, and if they're on the same frequency as you, you can get the same sort of look from interference from someone else's transducer. Not a lot you can do about that, unfortunately. If you have the ability to be able to change frequency, drop down a few, some of the top end sounders on the market have that capability. I believe with the BSM through Simrad they can do that as well. You may be able to get away and save that interference, but for us, stuck with 2 frequency, either high or low, 50-200, either live with it or move. There's not really much you can do about it. What else have we got here? Noise rejection. Again, I get asked about this one a bit. I leave it on low. I don't, the more you increase your noise rejection, you'll start losing detail and you'll start losing reads. So low is where I leave it out in the deep water. Okay. And lastly, TVG stands for time variable gain. It's an interesting one. It's one I've played with a lot, and really at the end of the day I always seem to come back to a setting of 1, which is ironically where this one is. I've been told time variable gain helps equalize the size of your reads from the top to the bottom so your marks or your soundings are the same size across your screen. I haven't been able to create that yet, and I do find the more I increase the TVG, and this is an example of it, it actually starts knocking out a lot of your, does knock out the noise and the clutter. But you can see the more you go, you start losing readings, and for us that's not really cool. So again, one's where I've left it on mine, and that works for me. Now, just another little trick, if we go back to the home screen here, took me a little while to work this one out, but if you want to do a split screen, so you want to see low frequency and high frequency, these units can do it. There are some sounders out there that can't. The way to do it is to actually hold your finger down on the echo symbol here. Holding it down, it brings up the sounder options, and the one right here in the middle, echo and echo, is what you're looking for. And you'll now see that we get a split screen. So we've got our low frequency on the left, high frequency on the right. Now with the Simrad and this combination straight out of the head unit, so as mentioned earlier, my transducers plug straight into the back of the unit, blue plug straight in the back, no BSM in this unit. What I can do and what I can't do. So what we can do in this mode is we can individually adjust the gain, so the power going through each one of these frequencies. So at 50 Hertz low frequency, I can go in here and grab the gain, I can crank it up, and you'll see it's having no bearing on the high frequency on 200. So if we turn that back down a bit, go back. Now if I wanted to do the same to high frequency 200, just clicking the screen, you can see there's an orange line around the outside. That tells you which side which frequency you're selecting. So now I've gone here, I can go into gain. This is still in auto. I'm going to take it out of auto. I'm going to take full control. There you go, you can crank it up, drop it down. No effect on low frequency. It's pretty cool. It's a good feature to do, and quite often when I'm out marlin fishing, I do still tend to use both the high and low in a split screen like that. Yeah, 7-inch unit. You're not getting a huge picture on the screen because it is only 7-inch that you're working with here. Pretty effective though. Again, the 200, the high frequency's got great detail, and I find it does mark bait quite well, so I don't mind having it there, but without a doubt the low frequency gives you the best arches. Again, if they're important to you, that's where you want to be, on low frequency. Don't get too hung up on arches, guys. Every sounder, every boat, every transducer I find seems to mark them a little bit differently. Some might be long flat lines, others might be good arches. Really depends, I think, on how the fish passes underneath the boat, again, and your setup. So a lot of people spend some pretty big bucks out on some, fairly high-end sounders these days, really looking for those arches. I'll admit, I'm always looking for them too, but geez, you could go and spend a few bucks if that's your main interest. But at the end of the day, if you can decipher a pelagic fish like a marlin or a tuna or a shark from bait, and then catch that fish, well then your sounder's done its job. There's not really too much more to go through here. One thing that these units can't do, we've spoken about a lot of what they can, and something that I would like to have the ability to do, but again can't just with the standard unit as it is, and this is the compromise for not having the top end gear. I can't go in and manually adjust the range. So again, the depth or the water column, the piece of water that I want to see between your high and low in a split screen like this. So if I show you here, if we go in now and adjust the range, 8 meters, it's going to change both. So at the moment we're set to 3. If I go to 8, you'll see both the units, regardless of what side of the screen I've got selected, the high or the low frequency, they both change. Be awesome if I could, because then I could really concentrate on, say, the low frequency looking for the deeper water stuff, which it works really well with, and have, say, the high frequency just looking on the top water column. Just gives you a little bit more ability, I suppose. You can do a little bit more with it, but as I say, in these units you can't. Not the end of the world by any means. It would be a nice to have. Anyway, guys, look, that's pretty much it. Hopefully this has given you a little bit more of an understanding on how to tune your Evo2s out in that deeper water. Really, it does come down to getting out there and using it, having a play with it. You really can't do anything to hurt them. Don't be too worried about giving it a crack. Guys, if you've got any questions, again, not necessarily saying the way I do it's the right way or the best way. I'm pretty much still learning as I go, and if you've got any tips for me or for anybody else, feel free to leave some comments in the comments section below the video, and hopefully you can get out there, go catch some fish and get the full use and capabilities out of your Simrad Evo2. Alright guys, all the best, take care, and hope to see you out there on the water somewhere.